Hello, for my music presentation today, I will be presenting Hamilton the Musical, a work of Lin-Manuel Miranda. So firstly, who is Lin-Manuel Miranda? So he is an award-winning composer, lyricist, writer, and performer. He is Puerto Rican and was born in New York, and he is probably known in the film world for writing the music to Disney's Moana and playing Jack in the sequel to Mary Poppins. In the theater world where he got his start, he is known as the man who does it all. So often he writes the book, which is the script of the musical, the lyrics and the music, and he performs in the shows that he creates. So he wrote his first show, In the Heights, which actually has a movie adaptation that was supposed to come out this year, but was postponed to next year because of COVID. It was his first show and went on to win a Tony. A Tony is one of the biggest theater awards in the world. And fun fact, he started writing the musical in his sophomore year of university. And it was one of the first musicals to incorporate rap in the Broadway world, which would later become his signature style as he went on to write Hamilton. Some fun facts about him is that he co-founded a hip-hop comedy group that tours comedy festivals over the globe, which is called Freestyle Love Supreme. He has said before that rapping is as easy as speaking to him because he grew up surrounded by rap music, especially when it first started to become popular. He often gives his awards acceptance speeches in the form of rap or a verse of poetry. He is only an Oscar win away from attaining the EGOT status, which refers to people who have won all four of the entertainment industry's major awards, which are the Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony. But with his new film coming out next year and a new Disney movie in the works, that doesn't seem to be too far away. His musical Hamilton won 11 Tony Awards with a record-breaking 16 nominations. And before he started in his composition and theater world, he was an English teacher. He was an English teacher. Okay, so how the musical came to be. So it's a musical based on the historical events of the founding of America and the founding fathers, specifically Alexander Hamilton, which is the man on the $10 bill, if anybody needed to know. And the musical is narrated by his frenemy in the musical, Aaron Burr. It is a sung-through musical, meaning it consists of continuous songs, so there's no dialogue except for one small scene. By definition, it is an opera, but the style of the music, which is rap, makes it a sort of rock opera or R&B opera, something like that. And the fact that it is sung through means that it relies heavily on the music to drive the plot. So what is it based on? The book that inspired Miranda to write the musical was entitled Alexander Hamilton and was published in 2004, was written also by Ron Chernow. So the inspiration came from vacation. So Miranda was on vacation in Mexico in 2008, where he brought the book along with him to read. And while he was reading it, he started wondering how it would look as a hip-hop song cycle, which is like a concept album of songs. He also realized that all other major figures like Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and John Adams have been the subject of countless stories, but none of them mentioned Alexander Hamilton. This resonated with Miranda because as the son of immigrants, he saw this as an example of the nation's treatment towards immigrants, so as individuals and collective parts of history. So he decided to change that by writing a musical. So the quartet who worked on In the Heights also worked on Hamilton. This quartet consists of Lin-Manuel Miranda, who's the writer and composer, Thomas Kail, which was the director, Andy Blankenbuehler, which was the choreographer, and Alex Lacamoire, which is the music director and orchestrator. So originally, before the musical was actually a musical, the few songs that Miranda had wrote were at the time part of a concept album. And he quotes about the life of someone who I think embodies hip hop, referring to Alexander. And it was called the Hamilton Mixtape. So he performed the title song of the musical, the soon-to-be musical, Alexander Hamilton, at the White House. And though everyone thought it was a bizarre concept and gained a few laughs from it, he earned the standing ovation from the president, the first lady, and everyone else in the room. Then the Public Theater in New York announced that the Hamilton Mixtape was going to be premiering off-Broadway. This was now in 2014, and the show continued to develop under the direction of Thomas Kail. On its opening night off Broadway, Lin-Manuel Miranda playing Alexander Hamilton, the tickets sold out completely. It then transferred to Broadway a year later and settled at the Richard Rodgers Theatre, which it is still being played at today. And critics said it was the best theatre of the year, and it brought new currency to the art form that has been too long taken over by movie adaptations and jukebox nostalgia. Jukebox musicals are musicals that reuse songs that already exist in the radio by pop singers, etc. So Hamilton the musical is still running on Broadway today, from when it debuted in 2015. It has a Chicago production. It has been around 3 national tours. It has a West End production, which is like the Broadway of London. And it has another production being put up in Canada soon, along with one being put up in Australia soon. So obviously with COVID being a problem, it all has come to a pause, but they did release a professionally filmed pro shot of the stage musical with the original cast, and it is now streaming on Disney+. So how long did it take to write? It took around 7 years to write in total, with one of the most famous songs, Satisfied, taking up to a month to write during the musical workshops. And before that, the title song, as mentioned before, Alexander Hamilton, took a year in itself to write, because Lin-Manuel Miranda knew that the song had to capture the intellect of Hamilton's character with the rhyming and the phrasing of the lyrics, so he wanted it to be perfect. Next, for the plot of the musical. So I'm going to mention it briefly. The first act takes us from Hamilton's beginning in the Caribbean to the end of the Revolutionary War in America, and we meet his first friend, soon-to-be rival, Aaron Burr. We also meet John Lawrence, Hercules Mulligan, and Lafayette, who were all turned out to be his closest friends and fellow soldiers in the war. Along with them, we meet the Schuyler sisters, daughters of Philip Schuyler, who's an army general. The Schuyler sisters' names are Angelica, Eliza, and Peggy, and Eliza is Hamilton's soon-to-be wife, and Angelica falls in love with Hamilton, but never acts on her love because of her stronger love for her sister. Then in the second act, we see the battle of the future for the Constitution, the fight in Hamilton's marriage and for his family in general, and his reputation. We also see the famous duel between Hamilton and Aaron Burr, where it all ends. I don't want to spoil anything, though it's all history, but nevertheless, I won't go into further detail. So one interesting thing about the musical is that the casting is race-bent, meaning Miranda saw an imbalance of casting when it came to people of color on Broadway, so he deliberately made Hamilton to feature majority performers of color in order to give them an opportunity for casting, without the community's incredible talents being overshadowed by their race. He says that the musical is the story of America then told by America now, and the narrative being the mostly white founding fathers building a nation, while a major part of the work was actually done by immigrants, whether it be from bringing entrepreneurship that made the economy what it was, and a lot of the actual manual labor of building the nation literally from the ground up. So though they were discriminated against at the time, the aspect of the musical is one of the reasons why it's so groundbreaking. And next, for the different styles of music. So though it is known as a mostly rap musical and not the type of rap you hear on the radio, there's not as much as you might think. There are also other styles present in the musical. I would say it's a fusion of classical Broadway jazz with blues, ragtime, rap, rock, and pop. And Lin-Manuel Miranda has said that he was inspired by a lot of rappers that he grew up listening to, and he pays homage to these rappers through different melodies and lyrics. Also, Beyonce was an inspiration, so the song Helpless in the musical resembles Countdown, which is a song by Beyonce, quite closely. Lin also included many references to the past musical composers which reflect his love and life in theater. He even was mentored and given advice by Stephen Sondheim while making the musical. Stephen Sondheim is another famous musical composer and one of Lin-Manuel's idols and inspirations. A lot of people actually call Lin the next Sondheim because of the thought and detail that he includes in his lyrics and music, and the connections that he makes between the characters throughout the songs. Another fun fact, it has the most words in a musical ever because of its fast-paced rapping. So if it was performed at the pace of any other Broadway show, it would take double the time or 6 hours to perform, because the musical is about 2.5 hours long. And there are as many as 144 words being rapped in a minute. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so the influence of the musical. So one aspect of how Hamilton influences the theater world is the diversity of the cast. So as mentioned before, it opened up a lot of opportunity to all actors of color and encouraged other shows to also be more inclusive too. Second, nearly every song in the musical works as its own song, like its own plot, which is also incredible. So there's an arc in every song that, if taken out of the musical, can be viewed as its own story. Okay, Hamilton showed the theater world that hip hop and newer sounds in general can be successful and big hits, despite what others might think. It also got the older generation to be interested in hip hop and newer musicals in general. So when reviews had shown that they prefer golden age musicals, Hamilton came along and changed this. And contemporary musicals were usually not to their taste. It also spread to non-theater goers and people who thought musical theater wasn't worth watching. Now they loved Hamilton, and it acted as a gateway musical to so many people, so they were now interested in musicals and were discovering the amazing music of Broadway. The art of musical theater that was once underappreciated and overlooked was now being talked about all over the world, which is a great accomplishment. It also got people interested in history because it's basically a history lesson told in the most entertaining form. After Hamilton and its many tours and productions around the world, a documentary was made from how Hamilton was made and the process of making the music, etc. Now, I can't directly say how Lin-Manuel Miranda has influenced other composers on Broadway because it's all relatively new, while in other cases like Sondheim influencing Miranda, Sondheim's music was on Broadway for around 50 years. But there is no doubt that in the future, Miranda's fusion and bringing modern sounds to Broadway will influence the next generation of composers and encourage them to make music that fits them as artists and best tells their story, no matter what the public may think, and no matter how many people tell them that a Broadway musical has to have a certain sound or to be successful. So for the music composition, I'm going to be talking about specifically the music, firstly the lyrics, and then deeper into the composition by talking about the motifs. So for Hamilton, since it's sung through, there's an importance on the lyrics since they replace the dialogue. So with Lin-Manuel Miranda, as mentioned before, his rhyming schemes are so well thought out, but also catch you off guard because they're so dense. He will have like two rhyming couplets that somehow wrap around into a triplet halfway through the next line. So there's always a forward motion present. I will show you an example. For example, on this rap where it says, "Now I'm the model of a modern major general, the venerated Virginian veteran whose men are all lining up." So this is just an example of that, if you can hear it.
Now I'm the model of a modern major general, the venerated Virginian veteran whose men are all lining up to put me up on a pedestal, right?
So that's the forward motion I was talking about. Okay, next. Some other great rhyme schemes are how he rhymes Socrates with mediocrities and manumission with abolition and ammunition all together. So they're incredibly well thought out. Something to do with the composition, Miranda gives the younger characters hip-hop influences, while Thomas Jefferson, sings old school jazz. So the styles of music represent the age of the characters. And towards the second act, Thomas Jefferson has an influence on Aaron Burr. And by the time Burr breaks out into his big number, The Room Where It Happens, his musical style has subtly shifted as he picks up Jefferson's jazz, which he was singing in the beginning of Act 2. Now, marks a turning point in the show in many senses. It marks the character Burr, how he stops waiting for opportunities, and then the gap in the historical record become a metaphor for how he was excluded from political events. And thirdly, the main characters are represented by different instruments. So Hamilton is represented by the drums because of his intense character. Eliza is by the violin, Burr is the cello, and Angelica is the harp. You can tell this when you listen. I don't have audio files because they're too big to download, but you can listen to this if you watch the pro shot, which I highly recommend. And every single time one of these characters come on stage or sing a song, these specific instruments are brought out in the music. So talking about the motifs, I'm going to try to keep this one short because I could go on for days about the motifs, as the music is very intricate and connected. So I'm going to try to keep it brief. Firstly, Hamilton has strong motifs repeated throughout because they are assigned to certain feelings and characters. So when the audience subconsciously associates a character or a feeling with this specific piece of music whenever it's repeated. So for the musical motifs, there are strong block chords that open the musical up and then are repeated throughout whenever Burr is about to make an exposition or impart knowledge on the audience as the narrator. He has two roles. He is the narrator and he plays his character, Aaron Burr. It separates him from the part, as he is simply narrating when the motif is played, and he steps away from the story and breaks the fourth wall to talk to the audience. Also, note, in one song, it is narrated by a different character, but is still used for the same purpose of narrating. It can be heard in Alexander Hamilton, Winter's Ball, Guns and Ships, just to name a few. And here are a few examples, if I can get to them. Okay, here. These are the block chords, and then the little run at the end that are repeated throughout as a motif.
How does a bastard,
That's in Alexander Hamilton, the title song.
orphan, son of a... How does a bastard, orphan, son of a...
That was in Winter's Ball, and then now is the next one, Guns and Ships.
How does a ragtag volunteer 89? How does the bastard...
And then that's the run repeated again in another song throughout, which just shows an extra time the motif is played. Okay, so there's also the music behind the line, Alexander Hamilton, we are waiting in the wings for you, which is a lyric that is sung in the first song. It's played when Hamilton is being talked about or thought about, or simply the subject of the song. I will also play that one for you. Hold on one second. So this is in the first song, Alexander Hamilton, we are waiting in the wings for you. And then it changes to another song further into the musical where only the melody is played.
Alexander Hamilton, we are waiting in the wings for you. Waiting in the wings for you. Never back down, you never learn to take your time.
That was in Alexander Hamilton. And then this is in Nonstop.
Would that be enough? Alexander joins forces with James Madison and John Jay to write a series of essays defending the new United States Constitution entitled The Federalist Papers.
I don't know if you could hear that, but it's in the background of the speaking and it's played on the piano. Okay, next, so now here are examples of the motifs used in the story and narrative. So there's one motif, it's the line, who lives, who dies, who tells your story? Which continues the theme of legacy, something that Hamilton, the character, is obsessed with throughout. Then motifs with Hamilton and Burr and their rivalry. Okay, so the first one is not throwing away my shot, which represents Hamilton always wanting to jump on every opportunity he has and pushing himself to the top. Then you have the motif of satisfied, which is always repeated throughout. It starts in the song Angelica Sings, and it represents Hamilton's drive and how he's never satisfied with what he has. Then for the third motif, you have Wait For It, which is the title of one of Burr's songs. And it's usually sung by the ensemble or Hamilton as they chant it in a whisper that crescendos as it repeats over and over again. It's usually Burr telling himself to sit and wait for it, or the ensemble telling him, mocking him, and telling him that he always waits for it, and because he's always afraid to be on the wrong side of history where legacy comes in again. Then we have the fourth motif, which is look around at how lucky we are to be alive right now. And we have enough as a motive itself, which both motifs are used by Eliza to Hamilton. So the first one, look around at how lucky we are to be alive right now, is to remind Hamilton to slow down and take time to enjoy what's around him because he's always so focused on the next thing. And the second one, which is that would be enough, is because Eliza never feels enough to Hamilton. She also has helpless as a motif that's repeated throughout. It represents her lack of control over Hamilton and what he does, and she always feels that he's constantly slipping from her hands. And then there's also a small musical and lyrical motifs for both Eliza and Angelica repeated throughout. These motifs are their names, but they have certain tunes. Okay, and then now I'm going to show you a clip of Nonstop. The song reaches a climax at the end with all of the major motifs I've talked about before being sung and played at the same time by the ensemble and the main characters. This part of the song gives an insight into each character's mental state. Another amazing thing is that all of these different snippets of songs are played from the beginning up to this point, which is this point, Nonstop being the Act 1 finale. And it can all be sung at the same time and sound consonant and work seamlessly together because they all sound extremely different, but they're transposed to fit the key of the music, which is F major, and so they work very well. Here is the clip. It's 59 seconds.
Alexander.
I have to leave.
Alexander.
Look around at how lucky we are to be alive right now.
Helpless.
They are asking me to leave.
Look around. Isn't this enough? He will never be satisfied. He will never be satisfied.
History has
So if you listen carefully, you could hear all of them combine into one, and a few new motifs that were represented in the song, like Why Do You Ride Like You're Running Out of Time, which is Burr constantly criticizing Hamilton for never wanting to take things in and always going too quickly through life. So yeah, that was my presentation. I hope it was clear and I hope you enjoyed, and I definitely recommend checking out Hamilton if you haven't already.